The funny thing about peace is that you don't know you've got it until it's gone. For 68 years, Hank Dalton woke up to the sound of sprinklers hitting dry dirt and coffee bubbling in the old percolator. He lived alone but not lonely. His mornings were slow, methodical. Grinding beans by hand, feeding the horses, flipping the same dented mug that said, "World's okayest farmer." Outside his porch window stretched 40 acres of golden light and quiet. His Chevy pickup, older than most of his neighbors' marriages, sat in the drive with a squeaky tailgate that everyone in the county could identify by sound alone. The air always smelled faintly of dust and honeysuckle. When the breeze came from the south, you could catch a whiff of the bakery 2 miles away. Maple Crest Estates had been built just beyond Hank's fence line 5 years back. White vinyl fences, HOA newsletters printed on glossy paper, and neighbors who waved just a little too tightly. Hank liked some of them well enough. A retired mailman named Carl sometimes brought over leftover donuts from the HOA meetings. "You wouldn't believe what they argue about," Carl would say, biting into a stale glaze. Hank would grin. "If it ain't about crops or cattle, I probably wouldn't." Every morning at 7:03 sharp, Hank's neighbor across the road, Susan, walked her schnauzer. At 7:15, the school bus groaned past. At 7:45, Hank poured himself his second cup of coffee and sat on the porch with a notepad, his daily ritual of listing things that didn't actually need doing. He liked to keep busy. Old habits from the service die slow. Keep your tools sharp and your temper dull, he used to tell the younger mechanics back when he wore a uniform. Now he said it to himself, half a prayer, half a joke. That summer, the weather turned kind, and so did Hank's luck. He'd finished paying off a loan, patched the barn roof, and finally fixed the tractor's clutch. The days rolled by like the rhythmic thump of the irrigation pump, predictable and easy, which is why the letter caught him off guard. It showed up one Tuesday in a crisp white envelope, tucked neatly among the grocery flyers. The return address said Maple Crest HOA. Hank frowned. He wasn't part of their neighborhood. His land had been there since before the county even had zoning. He turned it over, expecting maybe a property tax notice or something about new roadwork. But inside was a letter typed in cheerful Arial font. "Dear Mr. Dalton, the Maple Crest Homeowners Association is excited to announce our new community enhancement initiative. We'd love to partner with you in creating a recreational space that benefits both residents and local families. A small portion of your northern field could serve as the perfect site for our Maple Crest Park project. Please contact us at your earliest convenience to discuss details. Sincerely, Karen Weller, HOA President." Hank read it twice, then once more for the sheer oddity of it. "Park project," he murmured. He pictured a couple of picnic benches, maybe a swing set for the neighborhood kids. He didn't have anything against that. If they wanted to mow a bit of grass and hang a tire swing, he'd even help. The field was mostly unused these days. The soil wasn't what it used to be. Maybe letting the community use it would keep the weeds down. That evening, he called the number on the letter. Karen answered with the kind of cheeriness that felt rehearsed. "Mr. Dalton, so glad you got our note. We've been dreaming up this project for years. It'll be so beneficial for property values." Hank chuckled. "Well, ma'am, I don't think my cows worry much about property values." Karen laughed politely, like she didn't quite get the joke but didn't want to seem rude. "Of course, it's more of a community thing. You'll be compensated, of course, with a small lease payment. Just a formality." She emailed over a contract, 3 pages, full of the kind of legal fluff that made Hank's eyes glaze. It looked harmless enough. A short-term lease, 6 months, non-permanent structures allowed. He signed, scanned, and sent it back. He didn't even ask his lawyer friend Reed to look it over. Why would he? It was a playground, for heaven's sake. The next few weeks were uneventful. He noticed a few orange flags in the dirt, some survey stakes, a delivery truck or two. He figured they were planning a little landscaping. By midsummer, though, the noises started. Low hums, grinding engines, and the rhythmic clatter of something metallic. Hank drove his truck over one afternoon to take a peek. At first he thought the county had decided to repave a road. But as he got closer, his jaw slackened. There were steel beams, cement mixers, and men in hard hats shouting over the noise. He parked and walked toward the commotion, boots crunching on gravel. A woman in a neon vest intercepted him. "Sir, you can't be here." "I own this land," Hank said calmly. She shook her head. "Sorry, sir. This is part of the HOA's new community project. You'll need clearance." "Clearance?" Hank looked past her at what was unmistakably a roller coaster frame. "Ma'am, that's my pasture. My fence posts are still in the ground." She gave him that tight smile people reserve for the elderly when they think they're confused. "Maybe talk to Mrs. Weller. She's handling all property coordination." Then she turned away to shout at a crane operator. Hank stood there for a full minute, feeling the sun on his neck and disbelief in his bones. A roller coaster. On his farmland. He climbed back into his truck, muttering, "Well, I'll be damned." That night, he pulled out the contract again. There it was. Temporary structure development permitted. No mention of size. No mention of height. No mention of rides, concession stands, or ticket booths. He rubbed his temples. Guess that's what I get for not reading the fine print. Over the next month, construction intensified. The so-called park project sprouted into a miniature theme park. They had a merry-go-round, a tiny Ferris wheel, and even a water slide shaped like a cornstalk, probably their attempt to be local. Karen herself appeared on the local news, smiling beside a sign that said, "Maple Crest Family Fun Zone? Opening soon." Hank nearly spat out his coffee when he saw it. He tried calling her again. No answer. He left a message. Then 2 more. Finally, a week later, he received another letter, this one curt. It thanked him for his continued cooperation and reminded him not to interfere with ongoing HOA operations. Interfere? He shook his head. "Lady, you're the one interfering." Still, Hank tried to stay civil. He thought maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe once it opened, they'd settle accounts. Maybe she'd pay rent properly or clarify ownership. But then came the moment that snapped the last thread of his patience. One Saturday morning, he saw cars lined along the road and people milling about near the gate. They were charging admission. Kids with cotton candy, music blaring, laughter echoing off the barns. A handwritten sign at the gate read, $1.50 entry, cash or card. He parked by the ditch and walked up, curious and irritated. A teenage worker stopped him. "Tickets, sir?" "I don't need a ticket. This is my property." Mrs. Weller said to keep non-residents out. Hank blinked. "Son, I've been a resident of this county since before you were born." The kid looked nervous. "I'll, go get her." Minutes later, Karen appeared, sun hat perfectly tilted, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Dalton, so nice of you to stop by. Isn't it wonderful?" "I'm not sure wonderful is the word. You realize this is my land." "Oh, technically it's part of the Maple Crest development footprint now." "Funny," Hank said, voice level. "My deed doesn't mention that footprint." Karen smiled like a politician caught in a lie. "All perfectly above board. You should be proud. It's good for the community." He looked past her at the roller coaster screeching against the blue sky. "I'm sure the county loves surprises that big." Her smile faltered for a split second. That evening, Hank sat on his porch as fireworks from the park burst in the distance, their reflections shimmering in his coffee. The night smelled of popcorn and diesel. His field, his quiet, his life, now part of some HOA fever dream. He sighed. The frogs by the ditch were drowned out by carnival music. He leaned back in his chair, watching sparks fade across the sky, and said to nobody in particular, "That letter changed everything." At first, Hank told himself it would blow over. Maybe the county would shut it down once they realized there were roller coasters sitting on unzoned farmland. Or maybe Karen would run out of money before the thing even opened. He'd seen plenty of ambitious suburban projects collapse under their own paperwork. So he waited. He figured a quiet man could outlast a loud one. But instead of collapsing, the park grew like a fungus after rain. Every day, new trucks rumbled down the gravel road, each one hauling something shinier and louder than the last. There were ticket booths now, concession stands, and what looked suspiciously like a miniature castle being erected near the north fence line. Hank counted 7 porta-potties and a popcorn machine the size of his tractor. The place smelled like sugar and diesel. Then one morning, a white SUV pulled up to his gate. Out stepped Karen Weller herself, wearing oversized sunglasses and an outfit that screamed, "Suburban CEO." Her heels sank into the dirt as she strutted toward him. "Mr. Dalton," she said, smiling like she'd just awarded herself Employee of the Month. "I hope you're as thrilled as we are. The Maple Crest Family Fun Park is nearly complete." He nodded slowly. "Can't say that's the word I'd use." "Oh, don't be modest. This whole thing started thanks to your generosity." She handed him a glossy brochure with cartoon roller coasters and families smiling under fireworks. "Grand opening in just 2 weeks. On my land," he said flatly. Karen tilted her head, feigning sympathy. "Oh, Mr. Dalton, that's such an outdated way of looking at it. It's community property now. Everyone benefits." He stared at her for a long moment, then chuckled. "Community property, huh? Guess I missed that meeting where y'all adopted the Constitution." Her smile didn't falter, but her voice sharpened. "You did sign the agreement." "Sure did. The one that said, temporary structures, not roller coasters." She waved dismissively. "Details, details. The HOA board voted unanimously. It's all permitted." "Permitted by who?" he asked. "The HOA Planning Committee." "That's not a legal body," he said, amusement creeping into his tone. "Oh, it's quite official," she replied. "We have letterhead." That one almost made him laugh out loud. But he didn't. He just tipped his hat, said, "You folks have fun now," and went back to his porch. That night, he heard the music for the first time. Not faint or distant, but full volume. Calliope tunes blaring through loudspeakers, floodlights dancing across the sky like search beacons. It went on till midnight. His horses spooked so bad they broke a section of fence. He walked the perimeter with a flashlight, muttering curses into the dark. By morning, his mailbox held another letter. Certified, of course. Notice of trespass and non-compliance. It has come to our attention that you were seen entering HOA-controlled land without authorization. Please refrain from trespassing. Repeated violations may result in fines or legal action. Maple Crest HOA Board. Hank read it twice, then once more slower. A $1,200 fine was attached. He laughed so hard the letter fluttered out of his hand. "Well, that's new," he said to himself. "Getting fined for walking across my own field." He marched down to the HOA office that afternoon. It was a rented storefront between a nail salon and a vape shop. Inside, a volunteer secretary looked up nervously as Hank stepped in, cowboy boots thudding on the laminate floor. "I'd like to speak to Mrs. Weller," he said. She frowned. "Do you have an appointment?" "Nope, but I do have a trespass fine for walking on my dirt. Thought I'd hand-deliver payment," in sarcasm. Karen emerged from a back room carrying a clipboard thicker than the Bible. "Mr. Dalton, this is highly irregular. So's charging rent to the man who owns the land. You're creating disruption," she said sharply. "Please keep your voice down. This is a place of business." "Business?" he asked. "You're building a carnival on my pasture and selling $50 tickets. That's not business, ma'am. That's trespassing with extra steps." Karen smiled that patronizing smile again, the kind that made people want to throw something heavy. "If you have concerns, you're welcome to bring them up at our next HOA meeting." "When's that?" "Tomorrow evening, 6 sharp." "Fine," Hank said. "I'll be there with my deed." The next evening, he showed up in jeans, boots, and a clean plaid shirt. The HOA meeting was held in a repurposed barn at the edge of the subdivision. Rows of folding chairs faced a cheap podium decorated with a banner that read, "Maple Crest, Building Community, One Rule at a Time." He recognized a few faces from around town. Folks he'd sold hay to, or whose cars he'd helped jumpstart back in the day. Most of them avoided his eyes now. Karen called the meeting to order with the self-importance of a governor. "First," she said, tapping the microphone, I'd like to thank everyone for their hard work on the Family Fun Park project. It's shaping up to be a huge success. There was scattered applause. Then Hank raised his hand. Question. Karen hesitated. Yes, Mr. Dalton? Who authorized construction of commercial structures on parcel 409A? Karen blinked. I'm sorry. Who authorized it? 'Cause that parcel's mine. A murmur rippled through the room. Karen cleared her throat. Mr. Dalton, you signed an agreement allowing community use. For a park, he said. Not a theme park. Well, the board voted to expand the concept. Did the county vote too? She hesitated a beat too long. Hank smiled. Thought not. Laughter snorted from somewhere in the back. Karen's glare silenced it. This meeting is not the place for confrontations. Ma'am, Hank said calmly. I ain't confrontin'. I'm a skin who's gonna fix my fence the bulldozer broke. And who's gonna feed my horses when your guests spook 'em half to death. No one answered. Karen shuffled her papers. Moving on, she said stiffly. Next agenda item. Landscaping fees. He let out a soft chuckle and leaned back. Guess that's my answer. After the meeting, he overheard whispers. Poor old guy, someone said. Doesn't even know what he signed. Another voice added. You'd think he'd be happy. Property values'll go up. He walked out without a word. The sky outside was purple with evening, the distant lights of the park twinkling like an infection spreading through the night. Back home, he laid the lease flat on his kitchen table. He read every line, every comma. Most of it was fluff, community purpose, temporary development, non-permanent fixtures. But there it was, near the bottom, the one line that made his pulse slow and steady. Subject to county approval. He set his coffee cup on that line like a punctuation mark. Well, he said quietly, I don't recall the county approving a Ferris wheel. He folded the paper carefully, slipped it into a manila envelope, and labeled it Park Project. Then he pulled another envelope from a drawer, labeled Funny Business. It had held old tax receipts once, but it would do nicely for this. The next morning, he visited the county zoning office. The clerk, Marty, was an old friend, same age as Hank, same slow sense of humor. Marty squinted at the map Hank laid out. They built all that on your parcel? Sure did. Marty whistled. Well, that's gonna be one heck of a mess. Hank grinned. Not for me, it ain't. That night, as he sat on his porch, the laughter and music from the park drifted over the fields again. The lights blinked like a taunt across the horizon. He didn't feel angry anymore, just patient. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the fireworks blooming over his fence line. Somewhere behind him, the frogs croaked, unbothered as ever. He smiled faintly. I thought that was the end of it, he said to the dark. I was wrong. The morning after that meeting, Hank woke up before sunrise. The air was cool, heavy with dew, and the smell of soil and machine oil hung over the yard. He poured his coffee, watched the steam curl, and thought about what Marty had said. That's gonna be one heck of a mess. Most people would have meant that as a warning. Hank took it as a promise. He wasn't mad anymore. He'd burned through that stage. Now he was in what his late wife used to call his gearbox mood. Quiet, methodical, all motion inside. When you've spent years fixing engines, you learn not to yank and curse at bolts. You loosen them steady, one click at a time. By 7:30, he had his reading glasses on and his phone in hand, calling his lawyer. Reed Pickens answered on the second ring, voice dry as a saltine. You in trouble again, Hank? Not yet, Hank said. But I think I just leased my land to Disneyland. There was a pause. Run that by me slower. Hank laid it all out, the letter, the lease, the roller coaster, the trespass fine. When he was done, Reed chuckled. You always did have a talent for attracting lunatics. Yeah, well, this one's got a clipboard and a board of directors. Reed promised to look into it, and Hank spent the rest of the day mowing his front patch just to drown out the carnival music. He kept his expression calm when the kids waved at him through the new chain-link fence. No need to stir things yet. Let them think he was harmless. Let Karen believe she'd won. That night, Reed came over with a folder thick enough to choke a cow. "You're gonna like this," he said, spreading out the papers across the kitchen table. "I checked the county registry. Guess who still holds the title to every square foot they built on?" Hank grinned. "I'll take a wild guess. You. And get this, they never filed for zoning change or a construction permit. Not one. They're out here running an amusement park on agricultural land. It's like watching a toddler play with fireworks." Hank leaned back, satisfied. "So what happens next?" Reed smiled. "Nothing. Not for a while anyway. You let them keep digging. Every nail they hammer is an investment in your property. We'll file a quiet title claim next week, just to seal it tight." "Let them think I'm beat," Hank said softly. "That's my favorite part." The next few days he played the part perfectly. When the project manager asked if she could store extra lumber near the south fence, he nodded and even offered to mow a path for her. When Karen waved from her shiny SUV, he waved back, polite as a preacher. The neighborhood gossip will spun faster than a tilt-a-whirl. People said Hank had come around, that he'd seen the benefits of community progress. Karen bragged at HOA meetings about her positive negotiation style. They even hung a banner that said "Thank you, Mr. Dalton, a true community partner." Hank took a photo of it for the folder. He spent his evenings sitting by the porch with Gus, his old friend from the feed store. Gus was a wiry man with a smoker's laugh and a deep hatred for bureaucracy. "You gonna let her keep building?" Gus asked. "Oh yeah," Hank said. "Let her dream big. Dreams get expensive. Man, you're colder than a January pond." Hank smiled. Cold's just another word for patient. By the end of the month, the park was nearly complete. The roller coaster stood tall and bright against the sky, a steel snake coiling over his hayfield. Food trucks rolled in. Kids on bikes gathered to watch the lights flicker on at night. Hank could almost admire the construction. It was impressive in a financial disaster waiting to happen kind of way. Karen was everywhere, on the local news, in community Facebook groups, posing in front of the castle with phrases like leadership, legacy, and vision. She'd even started referring to it as Karenland in interviews. Hank saved those clips too. He was building his own little amusement folder, one document at a time. Reed filed the paperwork quietly, just as promised. Then he suggested one more move. "You might want to register a trademark for that name they keep using, Maple Crest Family Fun Park. It's free game if they haven't filed it." Hank raised an eyebrow. "Wouldn't that be mischievous?" Reed smirked. "Only if you tell them." So Hank did it. 2 weeks later, the trademark certificate came in the mail. He framed it, hung it above his coffee maker, and looked at it every morning with the same satisfaction most men reserve for wedding photos. Meanwhile, he started recording everything. Every delivery truck, every HOA announcement, every payment Karen bragged about collecting for advance memberships. He bought a drone camera from a kid in town and learned to fly it, capturing footage of the rides going up, perfect evidence for later. The footage looked almost cinematic. Ferris wheel spinning over a green field, sunlight bouncing off aluminum rails, families walking across a property line they didn't even know existed. One afternoon, Hank strolled over to the edge of the property, leaning against his fence while construction workers tested the carousel music. Karen saw him and waved like they were best friends. "We're almost ready for our grand opening," she called. "Looks mighty fancy," he said. "Hope it's all by the book." "Oh, of course," she chirped. "Everything's filed and approved." He tipped his hat. "Good to hear, ma'am. I sure do like things done properly." When she turned away, he couldn't help but grin. She was too wrapped up in her own spotlight to see the trap closing around her. By early fall, tickets were on pre-sale. The HOA website promised the biggest neighborhood attraction in the state. They sold out opening weekend within hours. Karen strutted around like she'd just built the actual Disney World. Then came the cherry on top. A local TV station ran a puff piece. Hank watched from his kitchen. The anchor smiled into the camera. A local HOA president transforms farmland into a $40 million amusement park. Karen appeared on screen, gesturing grandly at the rides. This is about community spirit, she said, turning underused space into something joyful for everyone. Underused space. Hank laughed so hard he nearly spilled his drink. That evening, he printed a copy of the broadcast transcript and added it to the file. Reed called it Exhibit A for hubris. Still, Hank wasn't in any hurry. He wanted her to keep talking, keep expanding. Every board meeting she bragged through, every dollar she spent without approval, it all made his eventual claim stronger. Sometimes he'd drive by slowly in his pickup, just to see the chaos unfold. Workers scrambling, parents arguing over parking, volunteers handing out flyers. He'd nod politely when people waved, like an old man enjoying the show. Inside, though, he was keeping score. By the time October rolled around, the park glowed like a city at night. Hank sat on his porch, watching the floodlights flicker and the sky blush orange. "They think I'm beaten," he said to Gus, who'd come over with a six-pack. Gus handed him a beer. "They sure act like it. They have no idea what's coming. Reckon you'll tell them soon?" Hank took a slow sip, eyes fixed on the neon horizon. "Not yet. Let M open the gates first. I want M to hear the crowd cheer before the sheriff pulls the plug." Gus laughed, a raspy wheeze of delight. "Man, remind me never to cross you." "You're fine long as you stay out of real estate law," Hank said, grinning. Somewhere in the distance, fireworks popped and echoed over the farmland. The whole sky looked like money burning. Hank leaned back in his chair, feeling the vibration in the ground. Every spark, every sound was just more evidence. More fuel for the story he was going to tell when it was over. For now, though, he kept quiet. He waited. He let the lights shine and the music play. Because patience, he'd learned, was the one weapon even an HOA couldn't regulate. And when the moment came, and it was coming, he'd be ready to cash in every ounce of that quiet. The day of the grand opening dawned bright, loud, and expensive. From Hank's porch, it looked like the 4th of July had swallowed a county fair and burped up glitter. Cars lined the roadside for half a mile. SUVs, minivans, a few pickup trucks full of teenagers leaning out and snapping selfies in front of the Maple Crest Family Fun Park banner. Loudspeakers blared pop music that made his horses pace nervously in their corral. The smell of fried dough and gasoline drifted across the fields. He took a sip of coffee, the kind of slow, deliberate sip that said, "I am in no rush. You, however, are." Down the hill, Karen Weller stood on a makeshift stage with a ribbon in front of her and a pair of oversized scissors that looked stolen from a craft store. The local news was there, 3 cameras, 1 drone, a reporter in a polo shirt practicing his community hero tone. Behind her rose the roller coaster, painted bubblegum blue, its first car loaded with grinning HOA volunteers wearing matching shirts. Maple Crest, where dreams live locally. Hank watched from his truck, engine idling. He parked far enough away that no one would think he was part of the show. From the distance, the scene almost looked sweet. Families cheering, kids running with balloons, Karen basking in applause like she'd single-handedly cured boredom. When the ribbon dropped, she shouted, "Welcome to the future of Maple Crest," and fireworks went off. Cheap ones, but loud enough to rattle the windows in Hank's farmhouse. He smiled and said softly, "And welcome to Exhibit B." The next morning, the newspaper headline read, "Local HOA creates $40 million attraction." Under it, Karen's photo beaming, hands on hips, castle behind her. A quote beneath, "All it took was vision and leadership." Hank clipped it out, flattened it carefully, and slid it into his growing folder of evidence. Reed would love this one. For a few days, the carnival rolled on. Kids screamed, lights flashed, traffic clogged the road. Hank waved to folks leaving at night. Most didn't realize they were trespassing on his land. He didn't mind. He wanted witnesses. On the 5th day, Karen came calling again. Her SUV stopped by his gate, engine humming like it owned the air. She got out wearing sunglasses and a smile stretched too wide. "Mr. Dalton," she said, striding toward the porch. "We've had a phenomenal response. The park's bringing so much attention to the community." "I've noticed," Hank said, setting his mug down. She gestured toward his field. Though we have had some feedback about aesthetics. That old tractor of yours is visible from the carousel. It sort of clashes with the theme. Would you mind relocating it? The HOA can even help cover storage costs. He raised an eyebrow. You're telling me to move my tractor off my land because it doesn't match your theme park? Just trying to keep the visual harmony, she said. You understand. He stood, stretched, and gave her his calmest smile. You're right, ma'am. I'll handle it. Buy the book. She blinked, unsure what to make of the tone, then nodded briskly. Excellent. Oh, and do remember, HOA property guidelines apply to adjacent lots now too. Community standards benefit everyone. He nodded again, tipped his hat, and watched her drive away. Then he went inside, picked up his phone and called Reed. Time? Reed asked. Time, Hank said. 2 mornings later, Karen got a different kind of visitor. Instead of TV cameras and ribbon cutters, it was a white county truck with the zoning department seal on the door, followed by 2 sheriff's cruisers. The officers walked the perimeter, checking papers, snapping photos, measuring things. By noon, they'd taped a big orange notice to the front gate. Stop work order. This property is not properly zoned for commercial use. All operations must cease immediately pending investigation. When the rides powered down, the silence was deafening. Hank sat on his porch and listened to it, savoring the absence of music like a man hearing rain after drought. Half an hour later, his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered anyway. Mr. Dalton. Karen's voice hissed through the line, tight with panic. Did you do this? Do what? You know exactly what. The county just shut us down. They say we don't have permits. They say this isn't HOA land. It's yours. How could that be? Well, ma'am, he said slowly. I reckon it's because it is mine. Always has been. County records don't lie. You tricked us, she snapped. No, ma'am. I just didn't stop you from tricking yourself. You'll regret this, she shouted. The board won't stand for it. Good, Hank said, his voice as even as a level beam. Then they can stand together while they read the injunction. He hung up before she could reply. By evening, the place looked like the aftermath of a storm. The parking lot was empty except for confused vendors packing up. A few parents wandered around arguing for refunds. The news vans came back, but this time their headlines weren't about leadership or vision. They were about scandal, lawsuits, and misplaced millions. Karen called an emergency meeting at the barn. Hank didn't attend, but Gus did. Purely as a concerned citizen, he said later, though Hank suspected it was for entertainment. According to Gus, the meeting was chaos. People shouting, accusations flying. Someone even threw a donut. Karen tried to explain it was all a misunderstanding, that she'd been assured of ownership. One homeowner asked who assured her. Another shouted, "Why didn't we check the deeds?" Someone else yelled, "Because Karen said she handled it." By the end of the night, 3 board members resigned, and the HOA Facebook group turned into a battlefield of memes and furious comments. Reed arrived the next morning with a fresh stack of papers. County confirmed everything, he said, grinning. No zoning permits, no transfer of title, no recorded lease amendments. You're sitting on the most legally documented amusement park in state history. Funny world, Hank said. A man lets someone steal his land, and the law calls it ownership. Technically, Reed said, the law calls it poetic justice. The following day, Karen tried one last desperate move. She marched back onto the property, ignoring the orange notices, and cornered Hank near the barn. We can fix this, she said, her voice brittle. We'll buy you out. The HOA can raise the funds. I'm not selling, he said simply. But it's the community's dream, she insisted. You can't just take it away. I'm not taking anything, he said. You built it. You just built it in the wrong place. She stared at him, trembling with fury. This isn't over. Ma'am, he said kindly. I think it just hit the final loop. 2 hours later, deputies escorted her off the property for violating the stop work order. Someone recorded it on their phone. By sunset, the video was viral. HOA president learns she built on the wrong land. 10 million views in a day. At dinner that night, Hank and Gus sat at the kitchen table watching the clip on repeat, laughing so hard they nearly spilled their stew. She really tried to wave at the camera, Gus said, wheezing. Like it was a ribbon cutting. Hank chuckled. Old habits die dramatic. Then, right as the laughter faded, Hank turned to the unseen camera of his own audience, his future viewers, and said in the easy drawl of a man who's seen every kind of nonsense, "At this point, I've got to ask, have you ever dealt with an HOA like this? Drop your story in the comments, hit subscribe if you love poetic justice, and let's see how many of us have survived HOA brutality." And just like that, he went back to his stew. The story didn't end there, of course. Karen filed complaints, threatened lawsuits, begged county officials to intervene. None of it stuck. The county's decision was ironclad. Every asset built on parcel 409 belonged to its rightful owner, Henry Dalton. Every ride, every booth, every dollar of revenue. The following week, Hank received an official letter stating that all structures and improvements are considered property of the landholder. He held the document like a winning lottery ticket. When Gus read it, he whistled low. "You just inherited a theme park." "Guess dreams do come true," Hank said. On Friday, a local reporter showed up again. Same kid who'd covered the opening. This time, his tone was apologetic. "Mr. Dalton, any comment on the situation?" Hank adjusted his hat. "Just this. Always read the fine print." Behind him, the silent roller coaster gleamed in the afternoon sun, a $40 million monument to arrogance and irony. He wasn't done yet, not by a long shot, because Hank Dalton had a new plan, and it didn't involve tearing the park down. It involved keeping it, running it, making it his own. As the reporter packed up, Hank glanced toward the horizon, where the sky was turning orange over the Ferris wheel silhouette. He smiled to himself, that same quiet, patient smile that had carried him through war, drought, and now suburbia. They thought they'd beaten the farmer. They hadn't realized the farmer was the only one who still knew how to grow something from nothing. Hank stood at the edge of the property a week later, hands in his pockets, watching the sunlight bounce off the roller coaster tracks. The ride sat silent now, hulking metal shapes against the morning sky. A few leftover balloons from the grand opening drifted in the breeze, caught on the fence. The carnival smell had faded, replaced by the familiar scent of dirt and wild clover. It almost looked peaceful again, except for the giant Ferris wheel looming like an alien sunflower. Reed's truck crunched down the gravel drive, kicking up a lazy trail of dust. He climbed out, holding a folder like it was made of gold. "It's official," he said, handing it over. "The county transferred ownership of all improvements and equipment to you. Congratulations, Hank. You now own your very own amusement park." Hank chuckled, low and dry. "Well, I've been wanting a new hobby." "Just don't run the tilt-a-whirl yourself," Reed said. "You've got bad knees." They both laughed, the sound rolling out over the empty midway. Hank flipped through the papers, reading the county stamp, the signatures, the words that confirmed what he already knew. Every bolt, every ride, every neon sign. All his. Even the trademarked name Maple Crest Family Fun Park belonged to him now. He'd registered it months ago. The irony made him grin. For a few days he kept things quiet. The HOA was still reeling. Karen had gone uncharacteristically silent online after her viral meltdown. The board members were scrambling to explain to homeowners where their dues had gone. Rumor had it she'd been asked to temporarily step down as president. Hank could almost feel sorry for her. Almost. He spent the mornings walking the property, clipboard in hand, jotting notes like a real businessman. The rides needed maintenance, of course. Some of the vendors had left equipment behind. The field was a mess of litter and trampled grass. But beneath it all, the potential was plain as day. It wasn't just a joke anymore. It could actually work. So he made some calls. Not to fancy developers or lawyers this time, but to local folks. The high school maintenance teacher, the town electrician, a few part-timers from the county fairgrounds. Within a week, small crews were cleaning up, repairing rides, repainting signs. The neighbors who once avoided him started stopping by to chat, curiosity getting the better of them. One morning, Mrs. Ferguson, the woman who used to glare at his pickup from her manicured lawn, showed up with a basket of muffins. "We're all just so relieved it's finally sorted," she said, offering them awkwardly. Karen meant well, of course, but, well, you know how she can be. "Oh, I know," Hank said, smiling politely. "But I'll tell you what, once this place is up and running again, you bring your grandkids. On the house." Her face brightened. "You're reopening it?" He nodded. "Sure am. Can't let $40 million of other people's mistakes go to waste." By spring, the park had a new name. The old banner came down, and a simple wooden sign went up over the gate. Dalton's Heritage Park. Built by the HOA, owned by Common Sense. The first reopening weekend was chaos in the best way. Families from all over the county came out, drawn by curiosity and the irresistible lure of irony. The ride spun, the music played, and the smell of popcorn filled the air again. But this time, every dollar went into Hank's pocket. He hired teenagers from the subdivision to sell tickets. The same ones who'd once laughed when the HOA fined him for trespassing. One of them, a red-haired kid named Kyle, grinned and said, "Mr. Dalton, you're a legend on TikTok. My mom used to complain about your barn. Now she wants a selfie with you. Tell her admission's $10, Hank said. Even Reed showed up that first Saturday, wearing a ball cap and eating cotton candy like a kid. "You realize you've achieved the dream of every man over 60, he said. "You beat an HOA and started a profitable business." Hank leaned on the fence, watching the carousel turn slow circles. "Didn't plan it that way," he said. "Just figured if they're gonna build a circus, might as well sell the tickets." Then, as if summoned by irony itself, Karen appeared. She didn't walk through the gate. She marched holding a clipboard like a shield. Her expression was somewhere between fury and disbelief. "This is outrageous," she shouted, over the sound of the Ferris wheel. "You can't just take our community project." "Karen," Hank said calmly, "I didn't take it. You built it. I just happened to own the dirt underneath. You tricked us." He shrugged. "You might call it a learning opportunity. This was supposed to be for families. For children," she snapped. "Looks to me like the kids are enjoying it just fine," he said, nodding toward the crowd of laughing kids with snow cones. She jabbed her clipboard at him. "You'll hear from our lawyers." "You mean the same ones who didn't file your permits?" Her mouth opened and closed twice, like a fish on a hook. Finally, she turned and stomped toward the exit. Security, now 2 retired veterans from town, opened the gate politely for her. "Have a blessed day, ma'am," one of them said. She spun, red-faced. "This isn't over." "Oh, I think it is," Hank called after her. "But you're welcome to buy a ticket next time." That moment became the park's next viral clip. Someone had recorded it, of course. By the end of the week, Karen vs. Dalton had 1 million views. The caption read, "HOA Queen gets dethroned at her own Disneyland." Hank didn't gloat publicly. He didn't need to. The town did it for him. Local news called it a storybook ending for the little guy. Radio hosts joked that Maple Crest was now the happiest irony on earth. Even the county commissioner visited, laughing as he rode the Ferris wheel and told reporters, "At least it's properly zoned now." Late one evening, after the last guests had gone home, Hank sat by the carousel with Gus. The air smelled of sugar and sawdust. Lights blinked softly against the dusk. "Never thought I'd see you running a theme park," Gus said, sipping lemonade. "Never thought I'd own one," Hank said. Gus chuckled. "So what's next? Disneyland 2.0? "Nah," Hank said. "I think I'll stick to this. Feels poetic." The carousel music started again, slow and steady. Hank leaned back on the bench, watching the painted horses turn under the warm light. It was ridiculous, all of it. But it was his. As the last light faded, he thought about the beginning. The letter, the arrogance, the way they told him to stay off community property. Now he was the community, and the property. and, somehow, the entertainment industry. He pulled a folded paper from his pocket, the original lease, creased and yellowing. He read the line again, subject to county approval. He smiled, tore the paper neatly in half, and let the wind carry the pieces away. The next morning, he mowed his front lawn for the first time in months. The rhythmic drone of the mower drowned out the faint carnival sounds behind him. When he shut it off, he realized he was smiling. Not the small, polite kind, but a real one. After lunch, a group of kids from the neighborhood ran up the drive, waving. "Mr. Dalton, can we see the roller coaster again?" "Sure thing," he said, tossing them a handful of ride tokens. "But don't tell your parents they're free. Bad for business." They laughed and bolted down the hill. By evening, the park lights came on again, glowing against the deepening blue sky. Hank watched from the porch as the Ferris wheel turned, slow and steady, each car filled with laughter and flashing phones. Somewhere in the crowd, he could hear the echo of Karen's voice from months ago, community purpose, and it made him laugh quietly. He sat down, poured a glass of lemonade, and raised it toward the horizon. "To paperwork," he said. The cicadas buzzed, the rides hummed, and for the first time in a long while, everything felt exactly where it should be. As he closed his eyes, the wind carried a familiar tune from the park, a carousel song drifting through the fields. It blended with the crickets, the rustle of corn, the faint laughter of children. It wasn't the farmland he used to know, but it was something better. Proof that a little patience, a little wit, and one well-kept deed could outlast any HOA on earth. And as the stars blinked on above the Ferris wheel, Hank let himself laugh again, soft and satisfied. Some battles are fought with fists, others with forms. He'd taken theirs and turned it into something beautiful, absurd, and completely his. Somewhere, far off, a car horn honked. Maybe Karen was driving by. Maybe she was flipping him off again. He chuckled and raised his glass toward the sound. "Cheers, neighbor," he murmured. "Still wave with one finger, I see." Then he leaned back, content, and let the carousel play him out. Spring rolled into summer again, the way it always did in the Midwest, slow, golden, and a little sentimental. By now, the rides at Dalton's Heritage Park gleamed fresh with paint. The grass was neatly trimmed, and the place hummed with life every weekend. From the porch, Hank could hear laughter drift through the warm air, mingling with the steady creak of the Ferris wheel. He'd gotten used to that sound. It wasn't the song of tractors and cattle anymore, but it was still his kind of music, proof that peace could wear a different outfit and still feel right. The park had become something of a local legend. Every news outlet in 3 counties had done their feel-good segment on the old farmer who outsmarted the HOA. Tourists came by just to take pictures with him in front of the "Built by the HOA, Owned by Common Sense" sign. He'd smile, shake hands, and tell them the same thing every time. "Just read the fine print, folks. It's cheaper than revenge." The funniest part was how normal it all felt now. Life didn't change much for Hank. He still woke before dawn, still brewed his coffee strong enough to put hair on a billiard ball, still took care of his horses. Only now, his morning routine included checking the park's daily earnings on a little tablet that Reed had forced him to buy. Technology and Hank had never been on good terms, but money had a way of improving friendships. Reed had come by the previous week with a new stack of contracts for vendors. "You're the biggest employer in Maple Crest now," he'd said, half teasing, half impressed. "That's got to sting the HOA a bit." Hank smiled. "Well, I figure they wanted community involvement. Now they've got it with payroll." Business was steady, but Hank never let it go to his head. He hired responsibly, paid fairly, and made sure the park felt like a community place. Families brought picnics, teens worked summer shifts, retirees volunteered to run the carousel. What had started as an act of quiet rebellion had turned into something wholesome, almost poetic. Karen, on the other hand, had vanished for a while. Rumor said she'd moved a few towns over, somewhere near a lake development. People whispered she'd joined another HOA there, though no one could confirm it. Hank figured some people couldn't live without a clipboard in their hand. He didn't hate her. Truth be told, he felt a little sorry for her. She'd wanted control and she'd gotten chaos instead. That's the danger with people who mistake rules for power. They forget who actually owns the ground they're standing on. Every now and then, though, she'd pop back up online. One of the employees showed him a Facebook post once. Karen ranting about unethical land seizure and small-town corruption. The comments underneath were brutal. One read, "Lady, he literally owned the land. Sit down." Hank didn't bother replying. He had better things to do, like restock cotton candy. The real satisfaction came from the neighborhood itself. The new HOA board, made up of quieter, humbler folks, had learned their lesson. They didn't fine people for mailbox colors anymore. They actually talked to homeowners before making changes. When one of them, a woman named Dana, stopped by to thank Hank for teaching us all a valuable lesson, he laughed. Wasn't trying to teach anything. Just didn't like being told what to do on my own dirt. Dana smiled. That's exactly why it worked. As weeks passed, Hank noticed how the park changed the rhythm of the community. Kids who used to complain about living in boring old Maple Crest now hung out there after school. Families who barely spoke at HOA meetings were sitting together on picnic benches eating funnel cake. People laughed more, talked more, even waved at each other again. For all the absurdity that had started it, something good had come out of the mess. On a warm July evening, Hank hosted the first Neighbor Appreciation Day. Admission was free. Music from a local bluegrass band filled the air. The smell of barbecue floated over the lot, and people milled around smiling. Gus worked the lemonade stand, grinning like a carnival barker. Reed wandered around shaking hands like he was running for office. Hank mostly stood back and watched, soaking it all in. As the sun sank, he climbed up to the small platform beside the carousel and tapped the microphone someone had set up for announcements. "Evenin', folks," he said, voice steady but modest. "I ain't one for speeches, but I figured I owed y'all a thank you for turning something that started out dumb and petty into something kinda nice." A few people chuckled. He went on. "When all this nonsense started, I thought I was just fightin' for my land. Turns out I was fightin' for some peace and quiet, too. Didn't expect to end up with a Ferris wheel, but life's funny that way. Sometimes you plant corn, sometimes you harvest chaos." The crowd laughed, easy and warm. He smiled. "All I'll say is, if anyone ever tries to tell you what to do on your own property, tell them politely that you appreciate their input, and then do it your way anyhow. Works better than yelling." Applause rippled through the field. It wasn't loud or flashy, just genuine. The kind that said people understood. Afterward, Gus wandered over with 2 paper cups of lemonade. "You made a fine speech," he said. "Didn't mean to make one," Hank replied. "Just started talking, and words came out." They sat in silence for a while, watching the lights come on across the park. The Ferris wheel spun slow and steady, its reflection shimmering in the pond. "You ever miss the quiet?" Gus asked. "Sometimes," Hank admitted. "But this kind of noise ain't so bad. It's honest noise. Happy noise." A kid ran past them chasing a balloon. Somewhere nearby, a woman laughed so hard she snorted. The sound made Hank smile. "Can't complain," he said softly. Later that night, when the crowd had thinned and the rides had slowed, he walked the property one last time. The air had cooled, and the cicadas had taken over where the music left off. He paused by the gate to look at the sign again, the same words that had made half the county laugh when he first put it up. Built by the HOA. Owned by common sense. He traced the carved letters with his fingers. It wasn't just a joke anymore. It was a reminder. Bureaucracy could build something grand, but it took ordinary people, common sense and stubbornness to make it worth keeping. He locked the gate and started the short walk back to the house. The stars were bright overhead, clear and sharp, and he felt that rare kind of peace that doesn't come from winning. It comes from knowing you didn't let foolishness change who you are. When he reached the porch, he sat down, poured himself a small glass of bourbon, and looked out over the land. The park lights glowed softly in the distance, flickering like fireflies. He thought about his late wife, about the early years on the farm, about how life had turned in the strangest of ways. "You'd get a kick out of this," he murmured. Never thought your old man would end up in the entertainment business. He chuckled, leaned back, and took a slow sip. The frogs croaked by the pond. A warm breeze rustled the leaves. Somewhere far off, a car engine faded down the road, probably one of the last visitors heading home. He smiled to himself. Another day done, he said softly. And maybe that was the real victory. Not the money, not the headlines, but the quiet satisfaction that comes after you've weathered nonsense and come out the other side with your humor intact. The older you get, the more you learn. You can't control the petty, but you sure can outsmart it. He finished his drink and stood, stretching his back. The porch light flickered, the crickets sang, and the air smelled like warm grass and funnel cake. Tomorrow the park would open again. More laughter, more stories, maybe even a new kind of trouble waiting around the corner. That was fine. Life always found a way to stir the pot. He shut off the light, glanced once more at the glowing Ferris wheel, and smiled that small, knowing smile of his. Good fences make great punchlines, he said to the night. Then he went inside, closing the screen door gently behind him, while out across the field the park spun on. Steady, ridiculous, and entirely his own.